Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's episode of Her Version. This is a podcast dedicated to hearing stories of struggle to triumph and challenges to victories, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth, their words, and their story in order to inspire others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Today's podcast is dedicated to every woman that has ever been abused. Today, I am talking to Chris. Chris has overcome abuse, alcoholism, and her life being threatened before escaping what seemed like 8 years of hell. Chris is here today to remind all those women out there who are being abused that there is hope. Anyone watching this right now, this is your sign. It is not by accident that you tuned into this episode. Today is your day to make a plan. Hello, Chris.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for asking me. I'm happy to be here. Very excited.
Awesome. I appreciate that. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Just was doing some last minute decorating of some cakes and just hanging out. This is my Sunday. I go back to work tomorrow. So
Good.
Happy to be here.
Good. Well, I'm glad we caught you on a day where you're relaxed and you don't necessarily have anywhere to be. So I want to dive right in. When I heard your story, I was so, first of all, impressed with who you are becoming, who you are now, presently, and your outlook on life and the future that you're foreseeing for yourself. To back up, though, and to really allow people to kind of understand that the person that they're seeing here is different than the person that you were. I'd like you to kind of take a few steps back and bring us back to when you first met your abuser.
Okay. So I met my abuser in 2012. At that time, I had about 2.5 years sober. I got sober in January of 2010. And in the program, they advised that you stay out of intimate relationships for the first year. I did not follow that. I did not give myself the opportunity to get to know myself. And I paid the price for that, I would say. So anyone newly in recovery, I would say definitely please take that suggestion, get to know yourself a little bit. I met my abuser through an online dating app, and we did not date per se. We spent time together, mostly in my car or at parks, and everything was just sort of a secret with him. And I guess that would probably have been, like, looking back on it, should have been some red flags for me. I was almost 30 when I met him, and just in a very strange place. I was looking at my friends who were not in recovery, kids that I had grown up with and in their 30s, married and looking at kids and looking at buying houses. And I thought to myself, like, I am nowhere near where I'm supposed to be. And I think that mindset nearly killed me.
Wow.
My entire life of always sort of comparing myself to other people and trying to match my insides to what their outsides look like. And, we get like the clip version of everybody's, social media life, and you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I was almost 30. I had this thing in my head where I'd be married, I'd have kids, I'd have that white picket fence, and I wasn't there, and I didn't think I'd ever get there. So I literally did not care who I was dating. It just didn't matter to me at that time. So then I met my ex. There were red flags right from the start. He worked on and off, lots of temp jobs and stuff like that. He had to borrow money from me right away. And he sold me this sob story about his life, which I believed. When I got sober, I went to school. I started working in the substance abuse field. At the time that I met him, I was working at a partial care hospitalization program. And so I dealt with a lot of people with severe, severe mental illnesses in addition to substance abuse. And I am definitely the type of person that has like a bleeding heart. Like if somebody is in a bad way, I want to help the best that I can. Never mind me. Never mind what I'm going through. I want to help this other person. And so I think that that personality type for me, of like avoidance of my own stuff, he felt like a really great project to take on. Like
Wow.
I was going to fix him.
Wow. I love the honesty in that. And I know that so many, not only women, but so many people can completely relate to that. Taking people on as a project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taking people on as a project. We want to be the giver. It's the giver in us that that destroys us sometimes. So you were sober already.
Yes.
When you met him.
Sober. Yep.
Was he sober?
No, not sober, not in the program, but also not a person who drank or used ever.
Oh, okay, cool.
Not in front of me, not when we were apart. And I think that's what made it sort of like almost like when things started to unfold, it was like almost unbelievable that a person could transform the way that he would without the use of a mood or mind altering substances. Like I think in my mind, if I could have written it off as like, oh, he's drunk, I would have been able to maybe believe it was happening more, like have it feel more like reality. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the life that I led with him very much felt like an alternate reality.
Wow. And I kind of do you mind kind of explaining, because I find it so ironic, the work that you were doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you kind of, what exactly were you doing? Because this just proves that you can see it in other people, but you can't always see it in yourself.
Yeah. So when I first met him, I was working, like I said, at a partial care hospitalization as a counselor intern. So I had like a 30-person caseload. I ran 5 groups a day, geared towards relapse prevention, mental health, boundary setting, navigating relationships and recovery, just really like very ironic stuff. And so I would go to work and sort of pour myself into that. After we had been dating a while, I got a job offer at a women's halfway house. It was a women's residential program, and that was the dream. Like when I first started going to school to be a substance abuse counselor, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with women. I wanted to work in an inpatient setting just because you have a little bit more time. Outpatient is sort of like, they're good for that time that they're with you. And then like, you don't know what happens to their life when they walk out of the doors. And it was absolutely, when I got the call about the women's halfway house, it was my dream job. And I was just so excited. And by then we had been together, I guess like 8 or 9 months. And he was staying at my mom's house with me. He was like pretty much homeless, like not really having a place to go. And his mom lived in a senior living facility and he wasn't allowed to stay there. And this guy was, 6 years older than me and his life was where it was. So, my family, I have to be really clear about this. I have 2 brothers, a sister, and my mom, and they felt him from day one. They saw him from day one. They did not like him. They did not want me with him. And, they say when you get sober that like, it's almost like an adolescence all over again. You're making those same sort of teenage mistakes.
Got it. Yeah.
And for me, I was just so like, how dare you judge him? Especially knowing me, like, and I've turned my life around. I'm sober 2.5 years. Like, how dare you judge somebody like he's down on his luck, Yeah. Then I started working at the women's halfway house, and my life really changed from working there. And I really have to, I know that there are some people that I either worked with or counseled that are here with us today, watching today. And I have to like really shout those women out, because I would not, I have to repeat this, I would not have made it without those women.
Wow.
So, life got really real. And now that I've sort of come out about my abuse, those women that I've worked with, so many of them have reached out and said, "Oh, you would have never known. You would have never known," because I didn't bring my stuff to work. I had bruises all over my bodies and sweaters to cover it up.
Wow.
It just was what it was.
So when you were working in a very similar industry to what you were living, were there moments of connection? Like, did you start? You did?
Oh, sure.
How often was that happening?
Daily.
Wow.
Yeah, every day.
And then what were you giving excuses? Were you seeing potential?
He was, okay. So maybe some potential, I'm not going to say that the whole relationship, every single moment of it was absolutely terrible. We connected on certain things, had similar interests, but I think that I was afraid. The abuse started emotionally and mentally first. So what I've learned is that a narcissist will break you down mentally. And he was very successful in doing that. I would question myself constantly because he would criticize me constantly. And when you're constantly criticized in your home, then when you leave your home, you do something and you think, oh, well, what would he think about that? Or did I do that well enough? Would I have gotten in trouble for that at home? Now, it didn't matter what that was, whether it was work related, not work related, it didn't matter. I was criticized over everything.
Yeah.
So that was sort of stage one of the abuse was that self-doubt. And I wouldn't say before meeting him that I had a ton of self-esteem, but more than I did when I was with him, for sure. From there, the criticism turned into verbal abuse. I know that now. When it was happening, I did not consider it abuse. I thought, like, this is just who he is. He's just a critical person. He would often blame it on his zodiac sign. Like, yeah, okay. It all sounds really crazy now. Like, when I say it out loud now, I'm like,
I totally get it. Yep.
But then, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's just how Virgos are. They're very critical people. I guess so. I've never dated one. The verbal abuse then turned to what he had done was gathered information on me. And that I've learned is what a narcissist does. They let you talk. Mm-hmm. They make you feel like they're accepting of all these things that have occurred in your past. Now, mind you, my past prior to him is not pretty. Mm-hmm. I was a substance abuser. So, my past is not pretty. And so I would tell him these things. And then he later used that against me. He would throw it in my face and say things about my family, my father in particular. I had a very tumultuous relationship with my father, and he knew that was a button of mine. And so he would push the button, push the button, push the button. And what I've learned now is that they push that button until they get reactive abuse. And once I reacted, the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
That was maybe 2 years into the relationship. At that point, when I reacted to we're talking about mental warfare here. I'm not talking about a person who says a nasty thing to you and you walk away and, talk about it later or it rolls off your shoulder. I'm talking about he would keep me awake at night. He would open all the windows in our home when it was 20 degrees outside, turn the fans on, and remove the thermostat.
Wow.
He would and go and go and go. And so when I finally hit back, that opened the floodgates for physical and sexual abuse at that point. So from that point on, I learned to walk on eggshells, to be very, very careful with what I said, what I did, who I spoke with, what I spoke about, how much time I spent out of my home. One of the things that somebody pointed out to me very early after having left him was that they knew at work what time it was based on the look on my face, because I'd get within 5 minutes of my stop time and panic. Like, I got to get out of here. If I came home late, that I would be up all night.
Wow.
Yeah. So working with the women at the halfway house, it was helpful in a lot of ways in my healing process. And I feel like I didn't know that was happening at that time, because when I did eventually leave, I did have some insights as to what the abuse looked like, but that was even still a process. It was still a process to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the point here is, when you're involved in something like that, it doesn't make sense to the outside, and it doesn't even really make sense to you. And unfortunately for a lot of individuals, it has to get to the point of physical abuse before any action is taken, which it seems like that was a huge thing for you, because soon after that you wound up leaving. But the abuse was happening the entire time. And it's so important for individuals to know that behavior like this, no matter what the excuse is, Virgo or not, my ex was a Taurus, and which is known for being aggressive. And I used to he never said that, but I used to think that in my head. We come up with these crazy excuses, and the behavior is not acceptable,
No. I mean, there's, and I do just want to say that once it went physical and sexual, I did not leave right away.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't. It went physical and sexual abuse, and I stayed probably another 4.5 to 5 years.
Wow.
So, in my process of healing from this relationship, I've had to reconcile why did I stay as long as I did? And I don't think that there's a solid answer for that. In recovery, one of the things that I can get caught up in is like, why did I stay out for as long as I did, drinking or using or whatever, right? And now I've gotten to a place in my sobriety with 11 years to say, like, every drink I took, I needed it, right? Because it made me the person I am today. And I'm getting to a place with regard to this relationship that I needed every minute that I was in there, because my life is like, it's straight magical today, my life. So I don't like to say that, I needed it, but my other theory is maybe I took it so someone else didn't have to. Maybe, you just don't know. The abuse was, I was in the halfway house for most of the time that I was in that relationship. And my job there changed. I guess like 4 years into working at the halfway house, I started more on like the administrative end of things and less client contact. And that really changed my life for the worst. Because I think because I wasn't really helping other people the same way that I had used to. And so not being able to sort of pour into other people's cups, there was no outlet. So I would go to work, do my job, and then go home and get the crap kicked out of me, for basically anything. It was hard. It was hard. It was a really, really hard thing to go through.
Who was the first person that you confided in?
No, nobody knew 100% of what was going on when it was happening.
Wow.
Nobody. Because I didn't want people to worry. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. There came a point where he wasn't getting the same reactions out of me when he would abuse me. And so he started threatening my family, my mother, my siblings, that he would hurt them, that he would kill them. And like you read stories like that and you hear things like that. And you're just like, no, they're not going to do that. But when you're getting pistol whipped in the back of your head with a loaded gun, you believe them. So, it was what it was. And I'm not saying I stayed to save my family. It was just this like sort of, he had turned it into this innate fear, a fear that I woke up with and went to bed with and lived with the whole time I was with him. And it was always in the back of my mind, what would he think? What would he say? What would he do? And I just did what I had to do to just keep him happy. But with a narcissist, there's nothing I could have done for him to find happiness.
Exactly.
He's a miserable human being. There's no changing that, And I think that somewhere in my head, I thought, like, I will change him. I will. My love will eventually be enough. He will eventually change. And once he changes, then I can sort of integrate him into my life. But I led very much a double life. There was like work, family, him.
Wow.
And they were all very separate things. And that's just the way that it was.
How long were you associated with him? How many years?
Almost 8.
Wow.
Yeah, almost 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So while this is happening, there comes a point where you think to yourself, enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
What was that point that you finally were like, I am thinking about leaving and I'm leaving?
Okay, so that process probably started like a year before I actually left.
Yeah.
And I didn't know when I started a year prior to actually leaving. I left in April of 2020. In February or March of 2019, I had like this really crazy idea that I was gonna be one of those pyramid scheme coffee slinging people.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I was going to do. Right. And what I didn't know then was that was the start of sort of reclaiming myself. It didn't work out. I was with it for like 3 or 4 months trying to sell coffee to anyone who would listen to me. But it gave me the opportunity to connect with other women, to have connection with people outside of my immediate family and my coworkers. And that started the ball rolling. I really do believe that. A friend of mine had brought that up to me, like that's where it started. And she was 100% right. That is absolutely where it started. I started to find a piece of me that I had lost a very long time. beforehand.
Wow. Do you
Yeah.
think a lot of it was just the teachings of it? Because a lot of times those multi-levels, they have like this
Yeah.
power and really?
Yeah, there was like a lot of talk about empowerment, and I didn't really necessarily believe it for myself.
Yeah.
Like I've never been that person. I remember when I got sober and they were like, you're going to have a life beyond your wildest dreams and the promises come true. And I was like, yeah, for everybody else here, but definitely not for me. And, it takes me some time to get used to the fact that like maybe something good will happen in my life.
Wow.
So yeah, being around those women, and they were very empowered, all of them, they were just like, they were doing it. And I was like, that's amazing because my life sucks, so that's really where it began. And
Wow.
that was in like I said, February or March of 2019. And then another big game changer for me that year was I started sponsoring somebody. And it was the first time I had ever sponsored anyone in the program. I had like 9 years sober at that point. And working the steps with another woman and spending time with them to work the steps and stuff like that. And I was not going to shortchange that person. And I guess more on that later, but I was not going to shortchange them. I wanted them to have a really great experience working through the steps, and I cared very much about them. So it was a risk I was willing to take. So I guess October of 2019 is really when the ball really started rolling, because that's when I started like, I'm going to AA meetings on Friday nights, and on the weekends I'm going to do step work with my sponsee. And I would get my ass handed to me, excuse my language. I would get the crap kicked out of me for doing it, but I did it anyway. I just was like, I'm not going to sit in this house with you. My ex was a believer in like conspiracy theories, end of the world stuff. And so he literally just sat in the house waiting for the world to end. And I was just like, I'm just not going to wait for the world to end anymore. I'm just not doing it. So I'm going to go hang out and like do AA stuff.
Yeah. Wow. So the ball started rolling with the coffee slinging.
Yeah.
What were, like, as you know, the steps between being in a dark place and being in a light place? There's things you have to do to get from one to the other. And a lot of times that's where people get stuck, is I want to get out. How? So can you share your experience on maybe your step 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 on what you did to move out of that situation?
Sure. So there was the coffee slinging. There was the sponsoring somebody. So really, if you take that out of an AA sense, just connection with another human being, right? Like a deep connection with another human being, not just an associate or anything like that. And so I would say that was the first step, was just sort of reclaiming a little piece of myself, just the smallest piece, and like becoming almost willing for the consequences. I guess the second step would be growing tired, growing very, very tired. I was in a place that was so dark and so scary, and I was constantly in survival mode and walking on eggshells, that I was tired. I was tired. I was a wreck. The next thing that happened for me, and maybe I guess I should have mentioned this earlier in the podcast, I'm also adopted. And the next thing that happened for me is I sought out my biological family.
Wow.
And, I was 37 at that, 36, 37 at that time. And so, 37 years of wondering, and then finding them, and what that experience was like. And I think I connected with a sister and a brother, and their reaction to me was so just welcoming and genuine. And I hadn't felt that in a long time.
Wow.
So that was the next thing. And so I guess, like, really, if I had to put a step on it, connection. Outside of your house connection is absolutely a step. That isolation that happens within a narcissistic relationship, breaking that spell, that is certainly a step. After those things, so coffee slinging, sponsoring, biological family, this was my process. Then it exploded. So what was happening was, it was as if these things was pouring salt on an open wound for him, which can be dangerous. And I want to be really, really clear on that. My path was a very, very dangerous path and could have ended a lot differently. So I'm going to go quick through this part of it, and trigger warning if anybody's in it right now, or trigger warning about specifics with abuse. So the pandemic hits, right? And they closed down AA meetings. We're not represented online. And I have a whole bunch of people in my life that need meetings. And so we start up a Zoom meeting and we're doing it 3 nights a week. Well, this is driving my abuser absolutely insane. And so one night he didn't want me to do it, and I was going to do it anyway, because I'm not going to disappoint people, because at the end of the day, that's what I am. I'm a people pleaser. So I had to leave the house to go and do it. I did it out of my car, and I had to block him on my phone because the text messages were just rolling through and it was interrupting the Zoom. When I picked the messages back up, he was irate. And my sponsee, her name is Jessica. She was my sponsee at the time. I was like in communication with her. And I had gone back home and made it almost all the way to my condo. And he was standing in the middle of the street, and there were people in the parking lot. And he came up to my window and said, "Don't embarrass me, let me in the car." And he got in my car and we drove out of the complex, and then he pulled a knife on me. I was held at knife point. It was probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes of him forcing me to drive. He was hitting me repeatedly. I remember just, sort of covering my face. That was always a thing. Like, my thing was I always had to get to work the next day, so I couldn't have like bruised up face. And I had bruises all down my arms and ribs, my legs, and he held the knife to me and berated me, just a lot of verbal abuse. And the thought in my mind that happened was the same thought that got me sober. And that was, I have worked so hard for 10 years for my mom not to get the phone call that I'm dead, and she's going to get it anyway. And I tried to go back to the house a couple of times, and he told me to keep driving. And then finally I tried to go back to the house again, and he let me go, and I dropped him off. And he asked me to get out of the car, and I said no. And he was like, fine, go back to wherever you effing came from, and blah, blah, blah. I knew if I had walked in the house, I wasn't walking back out of the house. Like, I was going to leave in a body bag 100% that night. Like, that is what was going to happen. And then I contacted Jessica, and she told me to come over, and I went to her house, and she got in the car with me, and I couldn't stay still ever. At that time, like, sitting in my house is a very new concept for me, because either he had me on some mission or I was trying to escape from him. So I was constantly in my car. And she wanted me to come in her house. I was like, absolutely not. I had never been in her house. Never. Never, ever gone into her house. And she was like, just, come inside. And I was like, no, I'll sleep in my car. And she's like, well, then we're both going to sleep in the car. Because she knew just as well as I knew that if she got out of my car and left me, I was going back.
Got it.
Because
wow.
The thing that happens with abuse is, even though it's painful and even though it hurts, it's comfortable because it's familiar.
Yep.
You know what's coming next, right? You know how the story is going to play out. I would have gone home that night. I would have not slept at all. I would have gotten the crap kicked out of me. He would have raped me for the millionth time. And then I would have gotten maybe 45 minutes of sleep and went to work. And that was the story of my life many, many nights. So it wasn't like so outlandish. But she didn't let me leave. And I, for some reason, listened to her. I don't know why. I can't explain that. Because my mom had tried, friends had told me, like, leave, we'll help you. And I didn't listen. I guess just the same way that you get sober, you're done when you're done. Yeah. I was done when I was done, and there was, I don't think there was any really getting through to me before then. And even then there were moments in those first couple of weeks that if I had not been being babysat and watched like a hawk by my friends, I would have went back.
Wow.
And it's crazy because I say, like, coronavirus did like amazing things for my life. And I know, like, it's been a terrible pandemic. People are like really not in a great space with it. We lost a lot of people. But for me, that night, if the pandemic wasn't happening at that time, I would have gone to my mom's like I often did. I would have stayed with my mom for a week and I would have went back. But because of coronavirus and my mom being a high risk person, I did not go to my mom's house because I didn't want to potentially, I was still working at the halfway house. I was not on quarantine. And so I did not go to my mom's. And because back to that thing that I said earlier about what it should look like, I'd be at my mom's house for like a week and I'd be like, look at you. You're 30 something years old. You're living at home with your mom. You're a loser. And all these things, all the things that he would say to me would place in my head, and I would end up going right back. So, yeah. So then I left. And that's a little over a year ago now. Like I said, I do want to say, I maybe didn't do it the right way. I don't think there's a right way. I don't think that there's an instruction manual for escaping from a relationship like that. If there were, I'm sure the narcissist would find it and burn it anyway. So everybody's path is their path. And the thing that is most important that I definitely want to say for myself and for anybody that's going through that or has been through it, safety is the most important thing. And so there were times where I was being abused, where it would escalate to a place where I would get scared of him, and I would leave. I would go back, but I would leave. He would not stop. I mean, we would be fighting about the same thing for 4 to 5 days straight. Yeah. He would say the same thing over and over and over. It didn't matter how many times I agreed with him. He just keeps saying it over and over and over and over again. That mental warfare. I would have taken a punch in the face over that mental stuff any day of the week. Yeah. Any day of the week. The physical abuse, I really, aside from the safety issue of it, I would take that over the sexual abuse and the mental warfare any day of the week. Yeah. Any day of the week. That was the hardest part, because then when I left, breaking that mental bind between him and I was the most difficult part. I had no idea that so much of what I believed about life in general was brainwashing. About people, about people's intentions, about my job, about money, about anything. So much of it was just straight up brainwashing. And so breaking that tie was, like, we used to joke, like, I am absolutely the mayor of delusion land. I was like the mayor living in delusion land, could not get my life to get, like, I'd say something to a friend of mine and they'd be like, what? And I'm like, oh, right. That's not actual fact. That's not real.
Wow. So I want to touch on this next subject um, for educational purposes, because a lot of times we like to think that leaving, like permanently leaving and staying left, is the end of it. And I want to bring this up not to cause fear or not to cause a reaction of might as well not leave, but just to educate. And to allow individuals to realize that there might be repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you mind taking us through the story of the harassing after the relationship?
Yeah. So like everybody else, I thought like, all right, I'll leave. He will get it when I stay gone long enough. Like if I'm gone for 2 weeks, he'll, without contact, that he'll understand at that point and respect it and leave me be. And that could not have possibly been further from the truth. Statistically speaking, you are at your most dangerous point from the day you leave into 5 weeks after. Though that is the crucial period of time where you have to be as safe as you can be. And I had to literally change every single thing in my life. And I wanted to hold on to stuff. I did. I'm not going to say like, oh, I left and now I'm so super willing. I was not willing, did not want to do any of it. It felt unfair. It felt unfair that I had endured abuse for 8 years and that he got to live in the condo in my name. It felt unfair that he barely worked for 8 years and that I was homeless. It felt unfair. I didn't want to have to do any of it. So I had to leave my condo. That was the first step. I stayed with Jessica. She had a roommate. That roommate was not thrilled with the whole situation. And I can understand that. I had like thrown their whole household into like this whirlwind of like, holy crap, what's happening? So Jessica and I decided we were going to get a place together. And so now I was staying with her. I didn't have like any of my clothes or things or anything like that. I did go back to my condo for my dog. I think 4 days after I had left. I still had my same cell phone number at that point. He was sending me pictures of my dog saying that, you know, she was going to die. She hadn't used the bathroom. She hadn't eaten. I went back. I asked if he would leave the condo. He did. But as I was gathering my belongings, like I got the dog ready to go, like leashed up, and then I just grabbed bags and just started throwing stuff. He came back in and he kicked me to the ground and this, that, and my dog bit him. So good job to my dog. And then we got out of there. We ran, you know. So I changed my number. I want to say, like I said before, like I was really still very delusional. I thought he would leave. You know, all my friends were like, regardless of if he leaves or not, you can't go back there. I was like, right, but I could still like, my landlord doesn't have to deal with this. So hopefully he'll leave. So I kept my cell phone number the same in the beginning and there was lots of harassment. I mean, I was getting 300 to 500 text messages a day from him. And just threatening and trying to go back and forth with me and making deals and this, that. And, you know, it just, and I was still very much thinking like, you know, maybe he'll say the thing that's going to change it. You know, there was a piece of me that was still like, maybe, you know, maybe this is the wake up call that he needs. I'm just so thankful for my friends. Like, I'm really super thankful for my friends because I was just so delusional, really. So then I changed my phone number. And I thought that would be the thing that would end it. And it wasn't. He just started calling me at my job. And he toned that down a little bit. But I would leave on a Friday after work and come back Monday, and I would have between 150 and 300 voicemails on my work phone.
Wow.
I dealt with that for a little while. So I left in the middle of April. I ended up having to leave my job at the end of July. I put in my 2 weeks mid-July at a job that I had been at for almost a decade. And it was the only place he could find me. He didn't know where I lived. He didn't have my current cell phone number. He wasn't like an email guy. So his only connection, I had blocked him on social media. His only connection was my job. And then I ended up leaving the job. That was one of the hardest parts about leaving. Because so much of who I was as a human being was wrapped up in that job. And because it was such an outlet for me and like my safe space, that part felt most unfair. And losing the paycheck, I got to be honest, felt most unfair, shortly after I had left him, some things for me came to light. I realized that I was absolutely head over heels in love with my best friend. And so I entered into a relationship very soon after having left, and I'm blessed, right? But the reason that I'm blessed is because the feelings are reciprocated. She feels about me the way that I feel about her, and we work toward a healthy relationship, communication and things like that. And she's also been through, her own past, and has given me my freedom to grow and change. Who I am when we got together a little over a year ago versus who I am today are two completely different people. And she stuck around. I mean, God bless her. Seriously, God bless her. Because I'm a wreck sometimes. But her support has been unparalleled. Just unparalleled. She is absolutely the person who got me through this year. So then I left my job, and I was unemployed for the first time in like 10 years, and in a pandemic where you're not allowed to go outside or like in a store. And so it was just me and the room behind me. And it was terrible. It was awful. I was in a really dark space at that point. There was no outlet. I had nothing. And I just had to figure out, like, how was I going to survive this? Like, how was I going to, I thought I wasn't coming back from it. I thought that there was so much damage done that this was it. Like all the stuff in my past was nothing in comparison to this. This was the thing that was going to take me out. And I believed it for a while. Last summer was really dark. It was a really dark period in my life. I was very vocal about where I was at. I was not doing that thing that I had done my whole life where people were like, hey, how are you? And my response was like, I'm great. Everything's great. I was like, I'm really effed up. I feel bad, and a lot of people were just like, oh. And those people stopped calling, because the truth is uncomfortable for people. When we say, hi, how you doing? We want to hear good, great, and swell. Yeah. We don't want to hear I'm doing bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
People don't know what to do with that. And that's okay. Because when someone's that honest with me, I'm like, well, damn, let's talk some about that, I guess, but, I have some really core people in my life that like heard that. They heard that and they just were like, okay, well then be that, be that today. And maybe tomorrow will look different. And slowly but surely it did. That's awesome. I have to say though, the things that I did to get well, I worked. It didn't just come. I didn't wake up one morning good. There are mornings I'm still not good. Mm-hmm. So I've mentioned several times I'm sober. I have a 12-step program. I worked all 12 steps all over again with a new sponsor. And then about 6 months after I left, I got into therapy. And therapy was the game changer. Between the steps and therapy, that was the game changer. That's when the healing started.
Awesome. 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 I love that. What are the side effects? A lot of times people don't realize that when you leave, there's still stuff that lingers with you. What are you dealing with at the moment that you're working on healing?
So I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. Complex PTSD is in symptoms very, very similar to PTSD. Complex, you're assigned that diagnosis when you've been through something for years, when it's years and years and years and years. And so the symptoms look like anxiety. It looks like depression. It looks like social anxiety and isolation sometimes, and fear, a lot of fear. In the beginning, I was afraid to go anywhere by myself. It's only since probably, I don't know, maybe February or March of this year that I feel like okay in stores by myself, or even driving in the car alone. That was another thing I had to do. I had to get a new car because he was so. And then November, after I had been gone from my job for, I guess, 4 or 5 months at that point, he called my job looking for a coworker of mine. I'm assuming to try and get in touch with me some way, somehow. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. That's when I filed a restraining order, because I was like, you are not going to harass this old woman at my former job. Like, stop it. And that's when I filed a restraining order.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. What would you say are the biggest differences between, I'm sure there's a ton, between your life then and your life now?
Everything's different today. I think that it still happens, like slowly but surely, like it's still happening. I know that, like in particular, when I was with him and I would go visit my mom, for instance, there was like a timer on that. There would be like, okay, if you're in this block of time, we're not going to fight. But once you cross over to a different point, we're going to fight about it. And I notice, like, when I go to visit my mom, after I'm there for like an hour or two, I still get that panic feeling of having to leave, but I don't have to leave. So that's one of the biggest things, is not having a timer on my life, not having to report back to anybody. That's something I'm like hugely grateful for. Just sort of getting to reclaim that part of me. My job is way different. So I left the halfway house and I was like, oh, I'll go back to working in the substance abuse field. And I kept applying for jobs in the substance abuse field and like going on interviews and being like, I would really rather not do this again. Like, I really, the stress of it. And, like I had to get to a place with myself where I was like, you know what, it's okay to do something that you want to do, that you enjoy doing. And not that I didn't enjoy the halfway house, I did. But there are other things. And so I started working at a bakery, and I just got so super excited. Like, Jessica and I are engaged now, and we had talked about opening up our own business. And so I was like, well, if we're going to open up our own business, maybe I should like gear towards that field instead. And this girl that I had been following on Facebook, she opened a bakery sort of local to me. She was hiring. I was like, hey, can I come work for you? I'm like really rusty. It's been like 20 years. She was like, yeah, come on down. So, so now I'm working at this bakery, and it's like, I have to get up at 4:45 in the morning and be in the bakery at 6 a.m. And I'm like happy to do it. Like once I get my caffeine, I'm happy. First thing in the morning, I'm not too thrilled, but then once I get there, like, I feel like it's my space, it's my vibe. My coworkers are great, and so I was like posting stuff, and And now we're, starting the business about a year early than we had originally intended. But, sometimes God does for me what I can't do for myself. I would have sat in fear on that one too. Probably another 8 years of just, maybe we should, maybe we're not gonna. So, my life is just, it's crazy. I look around at my life today and like, what was one of the most fun things in the beginning? Decorating. That, like, it was something I was not allowed to do. Like, that was worthless in his mind. It was like, why spend money on, a picture or a candle? And so I wasn't really allowed to do that. Like,
yeah,
someone got me a gift, I could light a candle, but to spend money on a candle was like not allowed. And now I like, Jessica, I feel like if you're watching this, Jess, like reel me in when I'm on my candle hunts, because I will buy candles all day long. It's crazy. It's crazy. But it's small stuff like that, like being able to sit in my living room with a lit candle and drink a cup of coffee, and even the food that I eat. My ex was what's called an alkaline vegan. It's a very strict form of veganism. Wow. And so I was a alkaline vegan for 6.5, 7 years. And so down to the food that I eat now, like I remember the first time, like when actually it was a month after I had left, we had just moved into our place, and I like snuck away when Jess was at work, and I bought a bacon cheeseburger, and I ate it, and I like immediately texted her and was like, I just ate a bacon cheeseburger, like ratting myself out, and she was like, good, bacon cheeseburgers are super good. So, just down to that, just down to food, and when I wake up, when I go to bed, all of that. All of it is different today. Everything.
I love that. I absolutely love that. How do you find yourself coping now? Are you in a good spot, mental, emotional? Where are you at?
Therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy. Go to therapy, please. Yeah. Go to therapy. I can't say it enough. And the thing that I like to really tell people, and the thing that really worked for me with therapy, is reminding myself, because I'm in the field, right? I have sort of an inside look into the way a therapy session looks, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I was going to find a therapist, I had to remind myself, like, you're the client now, and so you're in charge of the way that this looks.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I like went in and I set the tone. I said, these are the things that I want to work on. And we started talking, and then all the other stuff started to just pour right out of me. And I had a skill set of coping skills. I could tell you coping skills all day long. I just wasn't utilizing any of them. So, coping skills for me now just look like quiet. I lived in chaos for so long that, like, oftentimes it's just quiet that I need to sort of figure out what's going on in my head, and allowing myself that grace and that space from other people, from other people's expectations of me, and from my own expectations of myself. That's been the hardest thing, is like, what's it supposed to look like, Christine? That's what you need to do. What's it supposed to look like? And once I got to a place where I was like, it's supposed to look like what it looks like.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Life changed after that. Then I just was like, okay, well, if you can't leave the house today, then settle on in and get Netflix queued up, because we're not going to sweat it all day long.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. What advice can you give us on setting boundaries?
Set them. That's set them often. Set them with yourself. What I can say is this: people are going to be uncomfortable. Regardless, they're going to be uncomfortable, because people are always the wild card, in life. You never know how someone's going to react. You never know what somebody else is going through, what's going on behind closed doors. Did they have a bad night's sleep? Didn't they not get their morning coffee? Did their kid puke all over them? You never know. You never know what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So all I can say is honor yourself in those boundaries, and don't be afraid to tell people no. There is something I learned at the halfway house that was mind-blowing to me. It was within my first 2 months there. my boss was going away, and she was going to be gone for 2 weeks, and I was working a shift totally by myself. And she said to me, Christine, all I need you to know is no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
That was mind blowing to me, that I didn't have to explain myself to anybody, that I could just say no, period.
Yeah.
I don't have to say no because it's not a really great day, or no because I really don't. No, absolutely not. No, not doing it. No. Tired. Don't feel like it. Watching TV instead. Want a bacon cheeseburger. Whatever it is. That's just what it is. And the people that are in your life and are well-intentioned in your life and supportive of you, they're going to hear that no, and they're not going to take it offensively.
Yeah.
The people that do take it offensively,
yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
That's cool. I remember when I first learned that too. That was a huge moment for me. That exact thing, the no thing. That's funny.
Yeah.
What are some red flags? You have a lot that you went through, but what were the things you should have been paying attention to?
The things I should have been paying attention to was reciprocation. The other person putting in what I'm putting in. Employment is important. People do fall down on hard times, but if you meet somebody who's unemployed and they're telling you it's this person's fault and that first person's fault and this other person's fault of why they got fired, why they can't get a new job, every job that they get, they end up fired from, run.
Wow.
Run. They can't even conduct themselves enough to get a paycheck. That's what they're telling you. You know, one of the things I wish I would have known off the bat, my ex had a type. He, all of his exes prior to me were nurses, counselors. I was a counselor. He looked for people who had that bleeding heart syndrome.
Yep.
Try to recognize patterns. If you're talking with somebody on your first couple of dates and they start saying stuff like, oh, my ex was a nurse and so was this one, so was that one, like there's a pattern there. Why?
Wow.
Why are you targeting those people? Because we're vulnerable. That's why. We want to help people. That's why.
Wow. That's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so true.
Yeah.
So true. So 5-year plan. What do you have going on for your health and your mental state?
5-year plan.
Tell us what you got going on over there.
Okay. I'm getting married in January. I can't wait. We're in the middle of planning a wedding, so that's like the immediate thing we've got going on. I'm starting a business with my fiance, who will, soon be my wife. And beyond that, I try not to plan too far in the future. What I'm hoping for the next 5 years, I hope to do more healing. I hope to remain in therapy. Even if it's just to have somebody outside of my life to hear me, even if I'm being ridiculous, because sometimes I am ridiculous. Sometimes the things that bother me are just like, stop it, like, let it go. And so having that outside source to be like, all right, knock it off, you need to stop, has been super helpful. So I hope to still be in therapy. I hope to remain sober. My sobriety is what kept me alive. Had I relapsed while I was with my ex, not sure I'd be here talking today. And just be happy. Just, I have never really wanted a ton out of life. Calm, peace, serenity, happiness. That's the 5-year plan. That's
That's what it's all about. That is what it's all about. And that's what so many women want. And, they're just stuck right now. They're just stuck. And I love that you're here and you're proving that there is a way out, whether you plan it or not. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just have to do the next best thing. And it's not like you necessarily had this master plan, figured out, but you were taking steps towards your power. You were moving towards a light of some sort. And the way that it crumbles, you don't always have control over, but deep down inside, when it's happening, you just have to do the next right thing, right thing. And it's not always going to make sense. And sometimes it's going to be super messy. And, but you did it. And I'm so proud of you.
Thanks.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
What's your advice for women out there right now that are enduring abuse from their spouse? What would you say to them?
Recognize that everything is easier said than done. Try not to be angry at people when they simplify things for you and say things like, just leave, just go.
Yeah.
It's not just that simple. People who have been through it, they know. And so you can start real small. Any step towards your freedom is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And whatever it's got to look like, as long as you're doing it with your safety in mind, do that. What I can say is that what I didn't know while I was in it, and I wish I had, is that most counties, at least in my state in New Jersey, and I'm sure nationwide, if you Google like domestic violence resources, there's help out there. Like there's absolutely help out there. My path didn't have to. I'm glad my path worked out the way that it did, because I'm happily engaged and my life is just beautiful. But I wish I would have known that I could have made a phone call and had housing and had resources and had someone to help me walk through the process. And so if you're watching this, also know that if you go on I'm not going to say any, most of the domestic violence websites, they have a quick close off that'll send you directly to another site, so that if you're ever like someone's hovering over you, someone's walking up behind you, you're quick off the page. They'll have no idea what you were looking at.
Wow.
All of those places are trained in knowing not to leave voicemails, not to text, not to call unless you reach out first. There are resources, and they know how to deal with this situation so that you can do it safely. I know one of the big things for me was I could not have my phone going off unexplained. So there are resources, and there's always that quick exit button. And, I think that I'm tagged in the Facebook Live here. If not, you can find me on Facebook. I'm happy to help anybody in any way I can. Talk to you, just listen.
Thank you.
Of course.
You. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I didn't even know that. As far as the quick what is it?
The quick exits. It'll just allow you to different. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And thank you also for reminding us, as far as the that they're trained appropriately for what you're dealing with, in order to not disrupt what's going on. And just that made me feel so good. Ending on that note, because that is a fear. That was the same. I couldn't, anytime the phone rang, who is it? Let me see. And sometimes even put it on speakerphone.
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this for people who are going through this or have been through this. So important. That thing I said before, like that connection, that connecting with other people who get it and understand, it's so important. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at my website, herversion.life. I'm your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth in their words in order to inspire others. Have an amazing day. Much love.